I've really been interested in the space industry as far back as I can remember. I was born in Houston, Texas, so going to the Space Center there and all the science museums I think really piqued my interest at a young age. And then specifically the commercial spaceflight industry I've been really interested in since 2004 with the Ansari X Prize. So it feels really good to be living in what feels like an actual spaceflight renaissance. Man, I would tell myself to ask more questions. I think as a new engineer, and I'm sure this happens to a lot of new engineers and new employees in any field, but it's easy to get intimidated by the level of experience around you from some of the other guys who've been there a long time, who've been there and seen everything. So I could have saved myself a ton of frustration and learned a lot more in the process just by engaging more with the more experienced people around me. So my first job in the industry, and my first real job out of college at all actually, was at SpaceX as the launch engineer, which means I was designing ground support equipment for the vehicles and the payloads. And I'd always wanted to work in the spaceflight industry, but specifically at SpaceX since I read an article in Wired magazine in 2007 about the company. So I'd been watching the company and then had the tremendous good luck of having Elon Musk actually come to speak to the Yale Engineering School. And met him afterwards at a reception, asked a few questions, and I sent him my resume and came out to California. So that was my first job, and it's the one I've been in ever since. And my first day was just pure excitement. It really felt like a dream come true. Something that I, and I think many other young potential engineers and scientists and industry players have always been interested in, the science fiction world. I've always read science fiction books, I've watched the movies, and I think that breaking space out of this sort of old, solid, entrenched mold into fast-playing new actors, a bunch of startups, a bunch of things happening at a much more rapid pace really feels like the future is rushing towards us, and I think that gets a lot of kids excited. It certainly got me excited, and it certainly has gotten younger people that I know very excited, because there's something new happening every 6 months instead of it taking a decade between launch vehicles or between major innovations previously. I think the most important thing was always saying yes to projects that were a little bit outside of my comfort zone. Whether that was technically speaking, in sort of a management or complexity, or just the scope of the project, saying yes to a bigger thing than I had ever done before. So that allowed me to work with more people on different areas of the vehicle or different areas of the company. And then along with that is always being willing to work extremely hard and put in the effort so that you're turning those projects over quickly and you can get on to the next one and build both a deep and broad experience base. It's super important to be bringing up the newer engineers at the company and elsewhere wherever I meet them. I love spending time with the new grads on my team, whether it's sitting down and working through an analysis problem or walking down their project in the field in the construction phase or the activation and testing phase. I remember, it was not very long ago that I was a clueless new grad starting my first engineering job, and I got so much out of interacting with the more experienced people there that I want to give that back. And also I think it's really important for the industry as a whole for the newest engineers to be coming up and gaining as much knowledge and experience as they can very quickly. The biggest lesson for me, and I think this is broadly applicable across the industry, is that failure is unavoidable and acceptable, but the most important thing to learn is that you have to be able to respond quickly and intelligently to that failure and make sure it doesn't happen again. So as an engineer, at SpaceX, I designed hundreds of parts, which means I had plenty of opportunities for failure at all phases. I saw manufacturing problems that were design caused, I saw assembly problems, I saw activation problems, I saw failures in actual operation, all under tight schedule pressure. So the most critical thing there was to identify the failure, to learn from the failure, and to simultaneously be making sure that that failure won't repeat itself, because the space and satellite industry is one where repeat failures carry a very high price. So broadly speaking, I think what excites me most about where the industry is right now is the widening of the field. So we have costs coming down through competition and through technology advancements, and then simultaneously we have expansion of the envelope at the high and low ends. We have multiple new heavy lift launchers in development from a bunch of different players, which is going to allow bigger, heavier payloads than have been launched in decades. And simultaneously at the low end, we have a huge proliferation of small sats, microsats, nanosats, which is really leading to what I feel like is the democratization of the satellite industry. So, you know, a college team can make a satellite, which is amazing. So I think those things taken together is leading to a really positive feedback loop of engagement, both financially and from the engineering sector. And I think that feedback loop is going to allow huge acceleration of our expansion into space, both economic expansion and hopefully down the line colonization of other worlds. So the first launch I ever saw in person was actually from Vandenberg Air Force Base. And it was the first time that parts that I had designed were being used in the launch process. So my team designed all the launch site mechanical stuff, and I was, you know, some part of that was mine. And it was hugely stressful, obviously, to be down there and be listening to the countdown, and to have, you know, we had scrubbed static fire a couple of times, but this was our first actual launch attempt, and we nailed it on the first second of the window, and I could not believe it. I just blown away. You know, it's both the most stressful and the most rewarding, you know, 5 minutes of my life probably was that launch. It was absolutely amazing, and it just has never gotten old. I mean, I've been there now for, you know, 30 odd launches, and every single one is just as exciting as the last one.